Okay, I think we're hello and welcome to our debate. This is my first debate on this website, video debate that I'm doing. We're going to be discussing abortion, and I'm taking a pro-life stance on this. So hopefully we don't use any straw man fallacies or whatever, bringing up rape or incest as an excuse. But hopefully we could have a normal civil discussion. Now, a few years ago, about 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, back in 2012 to roughly 2013, I became very conservative. I saw pictures that were leaked of Planned Parenthood of unborn fetuses, and it really changed my outlook on life. Now, again, a woman has a right to choose whether or not she wants to get an abortion, and I would prefer the government to stay out of that. But at the same time, I don't like the idea of a woman getting an abortion because I feel like at least after a month, it's starting to become an unborn baby. Um, but I think that there should be some ways around it. I stated before, there's certain exceptions for a woman to get an abortion. That small percentage of reasonings is excusable, but I feel like most of the time when women get abortions, it's because of an unwanted pregnancy. They're having consensual sex with somebody and they didn't take birth control, or the partner didn't use a condom, and the woman ended up getting pregnant and she has to deal with this baby. And out of convenience, she wishes to kill her baby before it's born. Now, I think that all life is precious, all lives matter, and that we should just come together as one and find a middle ground when it comes to this topic. Now, I'm going to pass the mic over to you and hear your point of view because I've been rambling on.
Sure. Well, I don't think we're too far apart. I do think, a fetus that's a fertilized egg, et cetera, whatever you want to call it, the very earliest stages is a human life, and it's a unique individual, or it might be a couple different individuals depending on how it develops. But the earlier it is in pregnancy, the less we can associate it with as being a human being a person in our society, and therefore receiving our kind of moral protections and considerations. To me, morality is a social construct. It's part of how we live together and how we operate as a society. And when you look at a large number of people, I don't deal with these things as objective black and whites, but as kind of how we feel as human beings, what seems rational and good and bad to us. So while an abortion, especially in the very early stages, is a destructive act, right? That is a life. It's not quite the same as murdering somebody who's alive. And you can really illustrate this with thought experiments. Like if you're in a burning building and you've got a small toddler there who's squalling and afraid, and then you have a petri dish with a 2-week-old embryo in it, which one are you going to save from the burning building if you can only pick one? You're going to save the toddler because you don't have an empathic relationship. You don't have a name, a face, anything else to go with that petri dish, right? And it's probably just going to sit in the petri dish forever. But biologically speaking, it is a unique individual human life. So we have social and moral implications to who we decide to extend protections to that go a little bit beyond just checking your DNA profile, right? So, I mean, if you're just checking DNA, a blood sample would be a human being, but it's not. So we have to have an intuitive understanding. And when you look at the way abortion is dealt with, the later a pregnancy goes, the more uncomfortable more people feel about it. And we can make a reasonable point of view. We can come to some legislation that says, look, past this point, it's too close to being what we consider a human being. We have real empathy for it. We should not be destroying this life. As where very early on, let's say the first 2 weeks or something, there's so little going on that we can relate to as a human being. It is a very, we're not doing a lot of destruction or harm to any person when we make that abortion decision. And in between, there's a whole area where it's a difficult struggle. And I've tried to study carefully the development of a human fetus and just ask myself with an honest and open heart, at what point do I feel like I'm doing something immoral with them harming another person? And that actually comes pretty early for me. I have a long article I'm working on this, and it's earlier than some people otherwise would say. But I think we all kind of have to make that moral judgment, which is why I'm moderately pro-choice. And I don't think it's always wrong.
Okay. Oh, the mic's up to me. All right. Yes. So I agree with you on a lot of these points. Um, you know, it's my brother kind of described it as a seed that you take out after you plant it, but I see it more as like a seed with a little bit of roots coming out of it, and you take it out because I feel like the baby's starting to grow after several months, and I feel like what Planned Parenthood does is completely wrong, and we should not be spending our taxpayer dollars on Planned Parenthood, who is misleading us and claiming that 3% of what they do is abortions, when clearly at least 20% um, of their services are clearly abortions. 20 to 25% is a modest conservative estimate, because they kill at least 500,000 babies a year, or unborn babies, so fetuses technically. So with that being said, um, abortion I just feel is a moral thing that is wrong, but again, there's certain exceptions. I'm over and over again, I'm sorry about that. But there should be some way to just stricken make it more strict and have more boundaries for how a woman should get an abortion and when she should get an abortion. And I'm going to pass the mic over to you just because I'm running out of talking points.
Yeah, so when you're making moral decisions, I think the thing is if you're going to make a law, you're going to make a rule in society, you have to get a certain percentage of the people to ascribe to it. It's pretty easy. We all agree that murder is a terrible thing, right? And in various circumstances, we've defined what it is to murder somebody. Theft is something we all pretty much agree on. There's a few dissidents in our society that think, we should have no property, private property, et cetera. But we need a general level of moral agreement. If it's only like 50-50 on an issue, we get a whole lot of violence and clash and difficulty. And an abortion is a thing where we don't have strong agreement in our society. It's not something we can easily legislate. That's why, like the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade, they tended to use like a trimester framework, said past the second trimester, look, there's not a lot of people who are in disagreement that this is a very troubling thing, unless there's a really strong reason for doing it, like the child is doomed anyway, or the mother is going to die, or face serious risk from the childbirth. There's not a good reason to do it. We can restrict these things. But very early on, let's say like a morning after pill or a very early abortion where the fetus is barely developed, there's very few. I mean, there are people who have a religious viewpoint. They're pretty significant, but there's a not a large moral agreement that that is like murder, right? And so, like as you say, propagandists will try to show you the worst pictures or the worst scenarios and say this is what we're deciding on overall. But it's not really true. It's a whole range of things. And I think we can come to some things, but there is going to be a gray area. And when there's a gray area where we can't draw a strong line in these things, we're going to have to allow people to make individual moral choices, right, and decide for themselves. And that's why I tend to come down on pro-choice within a range, right? So very early on, I think it should always be legal. After a certain point, I think it shouldn't be. And I think there's ground for all of us to argue and try to persuade others that maybe you should consider never having abortion if you can handle it. But there are circumstances in people's lives we don't know about that are going to greatly influence whether it is a good moral decision for them or not. And I don't think we should be too presumptuous. Otherwise, we create a lot of conflict, and we're going to put people in a situation where they feel they're forced to do a moral wrong by the rules of the government.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm opposed to big government too, but there are some things that I don't like the whole excuse, well, it's my body. It's technically not their body. It's a baby inside their body. But for the most part, I do agree with you on a lot of stuff. At what point does it go from being a fetus to a baby? It's like the same controversial question about, the death penalty. Should we let the criminal who's been accused of all this horrible stuff suffer, or do we, pull the plug, so to speak, and end their life? It's a tough question, and it's the same sort of tough questions that we have with, abortion. At what point does it become a baby? At what point does a woman say, okay, I don't want this thing anymore? And there's a real war on dads. A lot of parents having kids out of wedlock, which is a huge problem. I could discuss that another time with you, but I will pass the mic to you and just see if you have any other final thoughts.
Enjoyed debating with you. If you want to do a longer debate on this sometime, I'd be open to that.
Okay, perfect. And I think I just press on debate, and I think we're good.